Okay, we can start. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from Copenhagen, and good morning, good evening to all parts of the OSCE region. Welcome to this OSCPA web dialogue, From the Arctic to Global, the Political Role in Addressing Climate Change. An event initiated and chaired by our special representative on Arctic issues, Ms. Turil Eidsheim, who will deliver her introductory remarks just in a few moments. This webinar replaces an event that was planned during the PA annual session in Vancouver, which we unfortunately had to cancel due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and follows the main lines of what has been the special representative's mandate until now, focusing on the Arctic, where effects of climate change are stronger, are more visible, to raise awareness and address climate change more broadly, with a particular attention to its impact on society, on human security, and also to the role of parliamentarians in tackling it. The topic of climate change has been receiving a growing interest by OSCPA members, and the second committee of our assembly, which covers the environmental basket, has recently prioritized it in its agenda. You will recall, for instance, the special debate the committee held on climate change during the winter meeting in Vienna last February, and then also the webinar in May on the linkages between the environment and public health. And the rapporteur of the second committee, Ms. Elona Geberea Hoxha, will deliver today the concluding remarks to this event. This is also the first online event we are holding after the summer recess and after the cycle of webinars related to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are glad to see many of our members connected today. Nevertheless, I really hope this is not what we have been calling the new normal, and that we will go back to hold these meetings in person very soon again. I also wish to welcome colleagues from the OSCE executive structures in Vienna, and of course our three guest keynote speakers of today, Professor Tore Furevik, Director of the Bjerkenes Center for Climate Research, Ms. Adelheidur Thorsteinsdottir, Deputy Senior Arctic Official of Iceland, representing the chairmanship in office of the Arctic Council, and Mr. Daniele Violetti, Director of the Means of Implementation Division of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat. Thank you very much for your readiness to contribute to this online debate. Just a few technical information from my side before we continue. This webinar is being recorded and broadcasted live, both on the OSCPA's website and on the Facebook account. English Russian interpretation is provided via the Interprefy app. Information on interpretation connection is available on the chat of this call. We recommend using a separate device, for example, your smartphone, to listen to it, and the password, the so-called token for today's event, is OSCPA webinar. Altogether, OSCPA and the W of webinar, capital letter, and the rest normal. We also then encourage, of course, active participation in the debate. Requests to take the floor should be written in the chat, possibly specifying your name, your country, and the language of your intervention. And our colleagues here will note them down, and a list of speakers will be always available on the chat. Please, I just want to remind you to kindly mute your microphone when not speaking. And in case of any technical problems, do not hesitate to contact us through the chat or via email, and our team will do the best to support and troubleshoot any problem. This is more than enough from my side, and I will move to agenda item number 1, introductory remarks by the Special Representative on Arctic issues, Turil Eisheim. Turil, to you.
Thank you, Guido, and dear distinguished guests and dear colleagues and friends. I'm really glad to welcome you all, and I hope that you enjoyed the short virtual journey that we were able to have before the meeting started. At the outset, let me thank you all for being connected today. It's an honor for me to chair this web dialogue on the Arctic and climate change. This year, 2020, has really taught us how interlinked and dependent we are of each other. Something as small as a virus of approx 50 nanometer has changed our lives and caused a global economic downturn. And to win this fight, we've seen that we need to work together. Global warming is an even greater threat to our lives and our future. And climate change is one of the greatest challenges that we have faced. Cooperation is really needed. And the title of our webinar today is From the Arctic to Global, the political role in addressing climate change. And actually, since my appointment as OSCE EPA Special Representative on Arctic issues, I've stressed that what happens in the Arctic does not stay in the Arctic. This webinar should be a step closer in the understanding of how the climate crisis is affecting the Arctic, and also how changes in the Arctic impact the lower latitudes, with a special attention to the effects on people's lives and also development. We will then debate our role as parliamentarians in addressing climate change and its consequences. This is extremely relevant to debate within the OSCE EPA. In fact, the OSCE is an organization based on comprehensive concept of security. And the climate crisis is indeed a threat to human security. The UN alerted that rising temperatures are fueling environmental degradation, natural disasters, weather extremes, food and water insecurity, economic disruption, conflict, and also even terrorism. The climate crisis is a threat multiplier with long-term effects on economic, political, and geopolitical systems. To help us in today's endeavor, we have three excellent speakers. First, Professor Furuvik from the Bjerknes Center in Bergen will guide us through the various effects of climate change in the Arctic and also beyond. And then, second, Ms. Alheidur Thorsteinsdottir, representing Icelandic chairmanship of the Arctic Council, will update us on the work taking place in this important political body for Arctic cooperation. And then, finally, Mr. Daniel Violetti from the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, and he will present us the status of global climate negotiations and the political challenges ahead. Dear colleagues, climate change is a global issue, and as such, it requires decisive and urgent global answers. Alone, we are not able to solve it. not in the Arctic and not anywhere else. We need a spirit of cooperation, solidarity, and joint responsibility for the future of our planet. In this context, political leadership is key. States need to work together to achieve the goals inclined in the fundamental deal, such as the 2015 Paris Agreement. As parliamentarians, we can leverage on important assets to contribute to this process. We can propose legislations, we can hold our governments accountable for their commitments, and we can also raise awareness and engage people. As you can tell, and you all know, there is much to discuss. And therefore, without further ado, I wish to give the floor to our distinguished guests and thank them for dedicating their time to our debate today. So I look really much forward to hearing you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Toril. And before opening the keynote panel and giving the floor to our guests, I would like to give the floor to our Secretary General, Roberto Montella, for some short welcoming remarks. Please, Roberto.
Thank you very much, Guido. Thank you, Toril, for organizing this event. And thank you, Guido, and the rest of the OSCE staff, Anastasia and Angelica, for running it. This, as Guido said, is, let's say, the beginning of our autumn season. So I'm very happy to see that we have 70 participants already at this webinar. Toril, thank you very much for taking initiative on this very important issue. The UN Secretary General Guterres, at one of the recent Munich security conferences, when he talked about the global challenges that we have in the world, he mentioned climate change as the biggest one. He mentioned climate change, a movement of people, the fight against terrorism. I would add one more now, the global health situation, which, as we know, is a big challenge that we have. But as you underlined, Toril, and I would like to underscore that, cooperation is really what is needed to solve and deal with these issues. These are global issues. The selfish recipe doesn't work. The recipe of everybody does its own business and doesn't collaborate with other countries doesn't work. So we need to cooperate, we need to collaborate among states, and this requires, of course, leadership. And here we have 70 participants, many of them leaders in their country. So it's very good that you debate these issues among yourselves. I will not take too much of your time. I just want to remind Toril of the visit you, together with the colleagues from the Norwegian Parliament, organized in Svalbard last year to show us firsthand the consequences of global change. As you said, it doesn't just happen in the Arctic, it has consequences for the rest of the world. And we could see that indeed with our own eyes. So thank you very much for organizing that visit, for showing us that experience. And we've seen some of the videos that recall that visit. And thank you very much for this issue and its impact on security. We are a security organization here, so I think this is very relevant to be discussed. Look forward to listening to the debate and to the distinguished guests that Guido and you, Toril, have invited them. So without further ado, I give you back the floor, Guido, and good luck. And thank you very much to all the participants.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And also President Tsereteli, hopefully he will manage to connect during the meeting, and we will, of course, hear some short remarks from him as well later on. With this, I move to agenda item number 2 and open the keynote panel and introduce our first guest speaker, Professor Tore Furevik, who will set the scene for us, providing us with an overview of the consequences of climate change in the Arctic and at lower latitudes. Professor Furevik is the director of the Bjerknes Center for Climate Research and professor in oceanography at the University of Bergen, Norway. Furevik has written more than 40 research publications related to climate change in the Arctic and the linkages to lower latitudes. He has been active in training the new generation of scientists and has initiated and coordinated a national research school in climate, several exchange programs with inter alia US and Chinese universities, and a large number of other initiatives. Professor, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for your contribution.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you also for the opportunity to give this a keynote. I will try to share my screen, so I hope you will be able to see it. So how it's going. Can you just nod your head if you see it? Very good. So I will use about 10 minutes to give you an update about the very important changes that are going on in the Arctic. Arctic, as you said in the introduction, I've done quite a lot of research on the Arctic, and it's very close to my heart. And the background, of course, for the changes that we see in the Arctic is that we are depending on energy for everything we are using, everything we're doing, and most of the energy is coming from fossil fuel. So every second around the day, every second around the year, we are emitting something like 1,300 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. So just imagine a balloon that is 10 meters in diameter and 1,300 of these into the atmosphere every second. And the atmosphere is this thin layer that you can see, this thin light layer around the globe. So it's only about 5 to 10 kilometers thick. So we are clearly changing the composition of the atmosphere. And we now have the highest concentrations of CO2 that we have had for about 3 million years. So that means that we have the strongest greenhouse effect that we have had for 3 million years. And of course, the planet is heating up. And mainly due to the distribution of land masses, we have most land masses, most of the continents are on the northern hemisphere. We see a strong warming signal in the north. So it's due to the land masses, and also it's due to the fact that when snow and sea ice are melting, then we get a much more darker surface and we get an extra additional warming. So we have a very clear signal in the global warming that we see on the Earth that the Arctic is the place in the world that's warming fastest up. And just to give a historical remark here, so it's about 125 years ago, the first actually expedition into the central Arctic. That was by the Norwegian explorer Fridtjof Nansen with the ship Fram. So they let the ship freeze into the ice and drifted for about 3 years across the polar basin. And what they did was not only to explore or to find new, to go to a new place on the Earth, they also did lots of exploration, and they did a lot of measurement for the atmosphere. They measured the sea ice, and they also did lots of measurements for the deep ocean. So they actually measured the depth of the polar basin, and they also did lots of measurements of temperature, salinity, and so on. And this is essentially what scientists are still doing. They go by ship into the central Arctic, and they do measurements. So this ship that you see in the lower left-hand corner is Polarstern. It's a German icebreaker, and that's just now it's up in the Arctic, and it's been drifting around for about 1 year with lots of scientists. And they are essentially doing the same as Fridtjof Nansen, the guy you see here on this fleet. They are exactly doing more or less the same thing. They are putting things into the water, and they are measuring the changes in the water. But since Nansen, of course, we have lots of other things that we use to explore the Arctic, and the perhaps most important things are the satellites. So this is just showing 4 of the many hundred different satellites that are used to explore the Arctic. So it's the 2 Americans. It's 2 American satellites. The 2 to the left are Americans from NOAA and NASA, and the 2 to the right are European Space Agency. So it's a cryosat. It's mainly measuring the thickness of sea ice, and it's Centennial that's measuring all different kind of things in the Arctic. And the lower left-hand corner is a very special one. It's called GRACE. So that's a twin satellite. So it's measuring the distance between these 2, and that's used to measure the changes in gravity due to mass changes, for instance, when Greenland is melting. So we have direct observation, we have satellites, and then the third thing that we have is the models. And of course, due to the growth of computer power, the models are becoming much better, and they are becoming much more complicated, and they are resolving much more processes. So this is just showing the data from the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast, ECWF. There's a weather forecast model, and it's showing ocean and sea ice model that's developed partly at the Nansen Center in Bergen and partly with French colleagues. So this is just also showing the very high accuracy that we can have with the models and how detailed they actually are now. So direct observations, satellites, and models. And I think the knowledge that the Arctic is changing very fast. We have had this knowledge for about 20 years. And I will just show 3 very groundbreaking papers that all came in December 1999. The first one was about the thinning of the Arctic sea ice cover. So that was direct measurements made by submarines in the Arctic. So lots of Cold War data were released. The second one is satellite evidence for an Arctic sea ice cover. So that's the sea ice area. So that was from satellites. And the third one was from a global model showing also that the sea ice was disappearing. So direct measurements, satellites, and modeling were used already in 1999. And they all came in December. And this led me and a colleague to write a short piece in a Norwegian journal called Arctic Without Ice, with a question mark. And that was so new, this thinking that Arctic would become ice-free, that we actually ended up in the New York Times. And I think it's very good title here. Research predicts summer doom for northern ice cap. And the mythic ice scape that stretches south in all directions from the North Pole is melting so fast that Norwegian scientists say it could disappear entirely each summer, beginning in just 50 years. And then radically altering the Earth's environment, the global economy, and the human imagination. So I think that's a strong statement, but it's still actually a fact. And most likely we were a little bit conservative. It now seems that we will see the first ice-free years or summers in the Arctic, perhaps in 2030, perhaps in 2035. Anyway, what we have seen the last 20 years or so since the New York Times article is that we have had the extremely fast warming in the Arctic. So the Arctic has warmed between 2 or 3 degrees just in a couple of decades. I heard some of you have been to Svalbard. That's a place on the Earth where we had the strongest warming on land. And if you look at the sea ice changes, it's dramatic what we are seeing. So this plot is just showing the part of the year when the sea ice is at the minimum in the Arctic. So it's from August till November. And the gray line you see on top here, that's how the minimum, or where the minimum was, or how much ice there was at the minimum in the 1980s. This greenish was in the 1990s. This blue in the 2000, 2010, and 2020 is this red line. So sea ice is disappearing very fast. And just so you can get the scale, because it's enormous large area that are changing from sea ice to open water, just so they have the scale. So this is about 2 million square kilometers, and that's the combined area of France, Spain, Germany, Poland, and Italy. So it's a huge area in the Arctic that changed from sea ice cover till open water. And of course that have dramatic changes or consequences. And finally, you saw this video before the seminar started. But what's happening is also not only area, of course, has changed, but also the thickness of the ice has changed dramatically. So only 30 or 40 years ago, Arctic was covered by very solid, very thick multi-year ice, old ice, more than 4 years old. But now we only have about 1% of this thick ice left. So the whole Arctic has undergone a huge transition. And also in combination with this, we also see dramatic changes over land, because also the land ice is disappearing. All glaciers on the Earth is now melting. Greenland is melting, Antarctica is melting. And it's been quite a strong melting since we started measuring this with satellites in about 2002. And perhaps you saw the dramatic news that came this summer that in 2019 we had a loss of about 530 billion tons of ice, and it's impossible to imagine how much ice this is. But if you think about the Olympic size swimming pool, 25 by 50 meters, it's about 7 such swimming pools every second year round. So it's an enormous amount of water that's released from the Greenland. And there are lots of questions about the tipping points. And what's important, this is not only Greenland, we see the same thing in Antarctica, and we see the same thing on all glaciers on land. So it's a dramatic change. This leads to sea level rise. And just a bulk estimate is that for every centimeter of sea level rise, about 1 million people have to be displaced permanently due to sea level rise. So 1 centimeter, 1 million people. So this is dramatic. Okay, we also see large changes, not only of the seas, of course, we see large changes in the water column. So this is just a paper I was part of 2 years ago. And this is showing the temperature or the heat content. You can just imagine the temperature of the northern Barents Sea. Not much happened until year 2000, but again, the last 20 years, it's been dramatic change. And we see this is part of what newspaper and also scientists now say it's an Atlantification. So we go from Arctic climate to Atlantic climate. So this is both in the ocean, we get much more salt in the water, much less fresh water, but we also see it in the atmosphere. So it's an Atlantification of the climate. We go from Arctic climate to Atlantic climate. And we also see that we have large changes in the atmospheric column. So this is a very brand new paper that came this spring. And this is showing, and this is part of what Toril referred to in the beginning, this is showing that not only do we have a warming in the Arctic, but we also actually see that the warming in the Arctic is impacting lower latitudes. And one thing that very many people, for instance, in China, Japan, Korea, are interested in is the very cold winters they've had, quite many of the last couple of years. It's been the same in the North America, actually. And it now seems that there is a linkage from the Arctic to the lower latitudes. And the simple story is that the warming in the Arctic is influencing the jet stream. That's the wind coming from west, going towards east, and this is influencing the weather further east. So there probably is a linkage between the warming in the Barents Sea and in the Arctic and cold winters, for instance, in Beijing. And then finally, towards the collaboration. So I mentioned the Mosaic cruise with Polar Stern. There are more than 100. There have been more than 100 scientists involved in this cruise to the Arctic. 70 nations. So there are people from all over Europe, Germany, France, Norway. There are people from US, Canada. There are people from Russia. There are people from China. So this is truly an international collaboration, where the aim is to study the changes in the Arctic. And this is actually a picture from the North Pole, and you can imagine, you can just look at the ice around the ship here. It's not solid ice anymore, it's more or less slush ice. So there is certainly changes in climate. And of course we have other agencies from the research, from my point of view, or from the research side. One very important thing is the International Arctic Science Committee that was founded in 1991. So this is coordinating the Arctic research. Of course, very important for us is the funding agency. So for us, the most important now will be the Horizon Europe. So that's the 9th framework program of the European Commission. So that's from 2021 to 2027, with the budget of about 75 billion euros. And then, of course, it's very important with the political dimension. Arctic Council, with the 8 countries bordering Arctic, is of course very important also for Norway. And then we have other bodies like the OSCE, PA, for instance. So I would say that we need all this. We need research collaboration. We need, of course, research funding. We need to have a collaboration between the Arctic states. And we certainly need to have collaboration also outside the Arctic, because, again, as Toril said in the beginning, this is not only impacting the Arctic nations, it's certainly impacting the globe. And sea level rise is just one of many impacts. So finally, I will just end by saying there's certainly a need for more cooperation, and thank you all for the attention.
Thank you very, very much, Professor. And we have asked your permission. We will circulate at the end of this webinar to all participants your slides in case they can be interesting for further analysis. And it will be indeed interesting then to debate how legislators can make use of all this information to propose policy and act in the national parliaments and at international level. Our second speaker today is Ms. Adelheiður Thorsteinsdottir, Deputy Senior Arctic Official for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iceland, and today representing the chairmanship in office of the Arctic Council. The Council is the main coordination body in the Arctic and brings together all Arctic countries as well as representatives of Arctic indigenous communities. Since the establishment of this mandate within the PA, we have immediately sought a cooperation, a partnership with you, and we hope that we can continue to enhance it after this webinar. Ms. Thorsteinsdottir is also head of the delegation to the Arctic Council's Sustainable Development Working Group since 2018. She is a career diplomat with previous postings at the Embassy of Iceland in Washington, and working on portfolios on defense and security issues, human rights, and European affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So also very close topics to the work of the OSCE. And she has also previous experiences in the UN framework as well as in the media. Ms. Thorsteinsdottir, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be with you here today, representing the Icelandic chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Let me share my slides with you. I hope this is working.
Yes, we can see it, but you can probably enlarge it in presentation mode.
I should have practiced better. I'm not used to this WebEx platform.
But we can see the cover page. It's working.
The thing is, how do I move the slides?
If you can just make it full screen with the there's a button on bottom right to make it full screen presentation, but we can see it and we can hear you, so you can go ahead. Now it disappeared.
I'm very sorry. We had a practice session and it appeared somewhat differently. Now I'm not able to.
It's okay. We can see it. You can just enlarge it, but otherwise it's good anyways.
The problem from my end is that I'm not able to see how I can, move from slide to slide.
But I would then just suggest that you start and we will then circulate the slides afterwards.
Okay, now something is happening.
It was actually working. We saw the second slide now.
Yes.
But to you the floor.
Okay, sorry for this. So I aim to give you an institutional perspective, focusing on the Arctic Council. And to begin with, I want to provide a brief introduction to the structure and function of the Arctic Council. It was formally established with the Ottawa Declaration in 1996, with the aim of promoting cooperation, coordination, and interaction among the Arctic states Arctic indigenous communities, and other Arctic inhabitants. This cooperation is focused on common Arctic issues, in particular sustainable development and environmental protection. Over the years, the Arctic Council has emerged as the leading high-level forum to discuss these issues. This has turned the region into an area of unique international cooperation. The Council has 8 member states: Canada, the Kingdom of Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, the Russian Federation, Sweden, and the United States. In addition, 6 organizations representing Arctic indigenous peoples have status as permanent participants. This category was created to provide for active participation and full consultation with the Arctic indigenous peoples within the Council. Observer status is open to non-Arctic states, along with intergovernmental, interparliamentary, and non-governmental organizations that can contribute to the Council's work. At any given time, the Council's subsidiary bodies are engaged in close to 100 projects and initiatives. Current projects focus on preventing pollution, fostering mental health, managing biodiversity and marine ecosystems, and monitoring Arctic climate change, to name just a few. With this substantial body of knowledge, the Council continues to produce comprehensive circumpolar assessments and reports of issues and trends that impact the Arctic environment and Arctic inhabitants. These assessments have been instrumental in bringing Arctic issues to a global arena. The Arctic Council and its working groups have also identified and shared good practices across a wide range of domains, including shipping, pollution prevention, waste management, economic opportunities, and environmental impact assessments. The strong knowledge base produced by the Arctic Council's working groups and other subsidiary bodies feeds into policy recommendations for informed decision-making, and I will come back to that later. I want to underline that the Arctic Council is a forum. It is not an international organization. Decisions are taken by consensus among the 8 Arctic states, with consultation and involvement of the permanent participants. The chairmanship rotates every 2 years among the Arctic states. Iceland assumed the chairmanship from Finland in May last year, and the Russian Federation will take over the chairmanship in 2021. Although the bulk of the Council's work is in the form of various projects, the Council has no programming budget. All projects or initiatives are sponsored by 1 or more Arctic states, and some projects also receive support from other entities. The Arctic Council cannot implement or enforce its guidelines. That responsibility belongs to each individual Arctic state. And last but not least, I want to mention that the Arctic Council's mandate explicitly excludes military security. The work of the Council is primarily carried out in its 6 working groups. They are responsible for executing the programs and projects that are mandated by the Arctic Council ministers. And here you see a list of the 6 working groups that have different mandates and fields of work. As I mentioned before, the strong knowledge base produced by the Arctic Council working groups and other subsidiary bodies feeds into policy recommendations for informed decision-making. And this is really the heart of what the Arctic Council does. Based on the compiled knowledge of the reports and assessments, the working groups often develop scientific summaries, and these in turn serve as the starting point for a set of policy recommendations, which are often outlined in brief summaries for policymakers. While the working group's assessments and reports follow the process of peer-reviewed scientific publications, the policy recommendations are reviewed and agreed to in consensus by the national representatives of the Arctic states, and with the consultation of the permanent participants. The policy recommendations are primarily aimed at the 8 Arctic states and the 6 permanent participant organizations. However, many issues across the Arctic require more far-reaching actions and thus depend on the involvement of non-Arctic states and actors. The Council's recommendations may therefore also provide a guide for action beyond the Arctic. Recommendations by the Council have contributed to and influenced a number of international frameworks and conventions. On 3 occasions, the Arctic states have negotiated legally binding agreements under the auspices of the Council. And these agreements aim at enhancing international cooperation on issues related to maritime search and rescue, marine oil pollution, and Arctic scientific cooperation, respectively. And when I turn to the Council's work in addressing climate change, I must begin by mentioning the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment from 2004. It was a landmark assessment that really served to draw attention to the issue. Some 300 scientists, experts, and representatives for indigenous peoples collaborated to develop a comprehensive, multidisciplinary account of climate change in the Arctic. The result is probably one of the most widely read documents focused specifically on the Arctic, and one of the world's first in-depth regional accounts of climate change impacts. This report was produced in collaboration by AMAP, CAF, 2 Arctic Council working groups, and IASC, which is an observer. And this was actually during the first Icelandic chairmanship of the Council. And since then, the Arctic Council has continued to produce regular assessments on climate impacts in the Arctic. These are scientific reports with summaries for policymakers that provide policy recommendations. And this feeds both into national policymaking and international processes. The most recent climate assessment was the 2019 Arctic Climate Change Update, and the next update is planned for the Arctic Council Ministerial Meeting next spring, before the end of the Icelandic chairmanship. An assessment of climate impacts on Arctic ecosystems is also planned for 2023. And the Arctic Council has been running a large number of projects that relate to addressing the impacts of climate change. And here I will just show you a few examples. And if I run through them quickly, AMAP and CAF are collaborating to assess climate impacts on Arctic marine, coastal, freshwater, and terrestrial ecosystems, as well as ecosystem feedbacks to climate. AMAP has published a series of regional studies on adaptation actions for a changing Arctic. In 2015, the Arctic Council established an expert group on black carbon and methane, and its objectives are to assess progress of the implementation of the Arctic Council's framework for action on black carbon and methane, and to inform policymakers from Arctic states and participating observer states. PAIM is planning a project on black carbon emissions from shipping activity in the Arctic and technology developments for their reduction. ACAP is working on mitigation of black carbon and methane emissions from flaring of associated petroleum gas in the Arctic zone of the Russian Federation. Wildfires are an emerging topic in the Arctic, and a new project led by EPPR aims to improve the coordinated response by Arctic states and permanent participants to catastrophic wildland fires in the region. I'll mention ARENA, which is an SDWG project that seeks to build human capacity through a knowledge exchange program that focuses on the development, operation, and management of remote energy networks or microgrids, incorporating renewable resources. And finally, I'll mention resilience, which is a cross-cutting theme for all Arctic Council working groups. And resilience means building the capacity of communities to recover and restore themselves from various kinds of crises and disturbances. And the effects of climate change are very relevant in this regard. The first Arctic Resilience Forum was organized under the Finnish chairmanship of the Arctic Council 2 years ago. And now the Icelandic chairmanship is organizing a new Arctic Resilience Forum in October, and this time in the form of a series of webinars. And I could go on and on, but to sum up, the important thing about all these initiatives is that we turn all this knowledge into policy recommendations and informed policy and good decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we now move from the Arctic to global. And I would like to give the floor to our third speaker, Mr. Daniele Violetti, who is the Director of the Means of Implementation Division in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat, the UNFCCC. The Means of Implementation Division supports international cooperation on the mobilization of financial resources, technology development, and transfer and building of individual, institutional, and systemic capacity to enable and support the parties to take enhanced action on climate change. Prior to his current position, he served as Chief of Staff of the Secretariat for 7 years. And he was also coordinator for the United Nations Secretary General High-Level Advisory Group on Climate Change Financing. Mr. Violetti also held various posts on issues related to the clean development mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol. Mr. Violetti, we want to ask you very, very clearly, how can parliamentarians and international parliamentary fora such as the OSCE support global negotiations for climate change? And of course, what are the political challenges in the current state of affairs? The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, and good day to all of you. And first of all, thanks for the opportunity to discuss these topics with you and in this very important fora. And appreciate the previous speakers and the framing they have given to the discussion. Well, of course, we do all live in very challenging times. This period is particularly challenging for many issues. But as was mentioned earlier, the climate crisis is still here. The climate crisis did not disappear with the arrival of COVID-19 and remains, in our view, the humanity's greatest long-term threat to the whole survival of our planet. So in this time of looking at how we can come out from this global crisis and at the same time address climate change, we all look at the potential for a global recovery from COVID-19 that is in line with the Paris Agreement and the United Nations 2030 agenda, so on sustainable development, so that at the same time we can tackle climate change in a planned, just, logical manner. And of course, we all want, as a result, a world that is safe, healthy, sustainable, and of course, more equitable for all. So our bottom line remains that the climate emergency has not taken time off because of the coronavirus, and addressing it now is not a choice, is a reality we face, and definitely we don't have the luxury of time. You know, we have seen some very important scientific data, so of course we are supporting a multilateral negotiation process with legal instruments, and of course the key of that are the negotiations, which in this period of time are particularly challenging. But what still remains central in the climate change process is the need to raise ambition. And raising ambition is raising ambition on mitigation, is raising ambition on adaptation, and raising ambition as well on means of implementation, so including also finance. Our central moment where the decisions are taken are our conference of the parties, so where all the members are joining. And this year, our 26th COP has been postponed to next year because of COVID-19. But even if the COP26 has been postponed, this has not postponed the need for parties, so our member states, to accelerate the work towards fulfilling the commitments they've already made. And there are a number of very important processes ongoing, which I would like to remind some of them, that are still ongoing at the moment, and they will all lead up to the COP26 new date, which is going to take place at the end of 2021. So, first of all, is the deadline agreed to submit new or revised national determined contributions, or NDCs, in 2020. So these are the national action plans that have been submitted in response to the Paris Agreement, and therefore the timeline is still holding and appreciating all the challenges in this period. But it is important that whatever comes has the right content of ambition in there. And I'll come back then in the question you raised about the critical role of parliamentarians. There are still pieces missing in finalizing the rule book of the Paris Agreement. One very important is the role for markets, which is also known as Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Then we need to have addressed finance-related matters, including long-term finance and finance for adaptation, which, again, these are all topics that have been mentioned earlier. So, and these are the critical ones that they take us to next year, very important milestone. And also addressing outstanding so-called pre-2020 items, include, again, finance issues. And all this should come with an enhanced transparency framework, which is the one will guide the monitoring of the progressing in addressing the goal of the Paris Agreement. So while some work can be undertaken virtually, it is clear that physical participation is challenging at this time. It's fully understandable. At the same time, some members states lack the technical capacity to have virtual full participation. So this is also another challenge. So we all look forward to when the conditions are safe for bringing back the negotiations. But at the same time, we are working with both parties, so member states and non-party stakeholders, to make as much as progress on these issues as soon as possible. So we are also working remotely, and we have our bodies, constituted bodies, that are meeting virtually. They are taking decisions, and we are making all our effort to continue to support global efforts to address climate change and reduce emissions. This is the pattern that we have taken in the first half of the year. So we continue to have discussion on major topic areas. We had in June a series of events called June Momentum, and which were made, provide a platform opportunity for exchanging views and sharing information. So in all this area, mitigation, science, technology, transparency, gender, and many more. We also launched some very important initiatives. One of them is called the Race to Zero campaign. And this is to mobilize leadership and support from non-party stakeholders, so from businesses, cities, regions, investors who are working to create a healthy, resilient, and zero emission recovery as well, but at the same time creating jobs and unlock inclusive, sustainable growth. So all this is ongoing, and of course, we are looking at all these different coalitions, efforts that are taking place. And this one that I just mentioned, for example, is driving net zero emissions initiatives that are setting interim targets to 2025, 2030. And the response has been incredible, has been really, really positive. So this is something that definitely we are all cheering for. I mentioned earlier the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs. So we have already announced from 114 countries that they announced they will enhance their nationally determined contribution. and 121 parties have committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. So these are very important commitments by states, and this is something that is really part of overall picture. So far, 14 nations have formally submitted their revised NDCs. And that's why it's very important that this, in this remaining month of the year, action is happening in this, because we do have an agreed deadline for that. And the last point, before turning to the contribution for parliamentarians, is really looking at this together in the overall umbrella of sustainable development. So we do have blueprints that already exist on this. So the Paris Agreement, the 2030 Agenda. So and all there are supported in different ways by the countries themselves. So in this period of difficulty, we are still encouraged by many actions happening and many political commitments made by so many countries in looking at, we are transitioning to a new low carbon and climate resilient type of economies. And all this it can happen by joining forces, working as an international community, working into the multilateral space that has been created and dedicated for that. And this is where we really want to continue to boost action on climate change. And as I said, we do have this very important milestone in 2021, which will be a very important year for many other processes related to sustainable development, biodiversity, desertification, food system. There will be a year very, very intense of sustainable development agendas. Closing role of parliamentarians. I mean, I have already heard a very critical one in the crafting and developing legislation at the national level. Of course, the strong action at the national level that parliamentarians can bring in developing these policies, in having the appropriate legislation in place. I also mentioned this nationally determined contribution, these national plans, where of course they require support at the national level in ensuring that the right point of ambition is displayed and of course in accordance with national priorities, which I fully appreciate the central role of. So all stakeholders have the possibility to contribute, all from, as I mentioned, private sector to governments. And I'm very glad to address this distinguished group of participants, because the role of parliamentarians is one of the critical ones in moving the agenda forward at the national level and contributing to the international discussion. So I can stop here, and of course, happy to participate in discussion and questions as they come. And I close by thanking again for having me here with you today. And yeah, stay safe in any case. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you. It's us thanking you for participating and for creating this link between the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and the UN Climate Change Secretariat. Thank you also for detailing a few assets that how parliamentarians could contribute, and for presenting the main principle that should guide them. You said we need to be ambitious. Climate, we must have climate ambition, and this could be also now the principle for the debate that will start now. Also, trying to debate how we can be ambitious both at national level and within our parliamentary assembly. So thanks again to all our three guest speakers for sharing your views and your knowledge. And we now move to the agenda item number 3, the debate, the open debate. I encourage you to sign up on the chat to take the floor. We have at the current moment 3 registered speakers, and we have some good time ahead of us before 5 o'clock. Therefore, I'll give the floor to the first speaker on the list, our Vice President, Margareta Cederfelt from Sweden, please.
Thank you very much, Gui. I would like to start to say thank you, Toril, for arranging this very important webinar. I think it's very interesting to listen to this, as I'm from Sweden and it's an Arctic country. At least a part of Sweden is in the Arctic region. And I would also like to say thank you to our three speakers. It's been very interesting to listen to you and your different perspective. My question is about, first of all, what do you think should be the most important steps for us as parliamentarians to take? I ask this because always when it's come to politics and priorities, there will be a discussion about who should decide what and what could we earn, what could they earn, and how to go further on. And I think this is an important issue to make a situation where there is a win-win situation, where we can see that it's a benefit for all of us. And if you could elaborate a bit on this, I would be very grateful. Then I have also another question that I would like to raise. When you're speaking about the water and the difference of the quality, and it will be more salty and so on, could you please say how this could affect us, as the water is for all of us on the earth, and we drink it, the fishes live in it, it's our growth is depending on it, our agriculture and so on. So what does this mean in reality? If you have something to say on this, I could see that it might only affect the north, but I could also see that the whole of the earth is affected. Not only that there will be a rise of the water level, but the different, what should I say, the different, not construction, but the different level of salts and how the water is composed. If you could say a few words on this, it would be very interesting. I stop with this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker on the list is Senator Rosa Galvez from Canada. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning. Yes, me too. I want to join the thanks for the three speakers. It was very, very interesting. So just a couple of days ago, I was in a scientific conference from
Senator,
OSCE.
sorry, we cannot see you. We hear you, but we cannot see you.
I put.
Now we see you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. So thank you again. Me too. I'm very grateful for you, the organizers, and for the speakers. So I was saying that I was listening to a conference given by the Canadian scientist members of Mosaic, the research in the Arctic. And I learned that the Arctic regions of Canada are warming and thawing even faster than other regions in the Arctic. So this is very worrisome for Canadians. And we have our indigenous communities around the shores. So this is very, very worrisome. So I have two questions. The first question is that we've been calling transition. We've been saying we have to transition to a decarbonized society and decarbonized industry and decarbonized transport. But the problem by calling it transition is that, people lose confidence and distrust in the political class because transitions become permanent. As the first speaker said, we have known that the Arctic was warming now 20 years. So we have to find ways of really attaining the goals that our government says we are going to attain. Otherwise, we will face other problems, such as the distrust in the democratic institution. And my second question is that it's true that we parliamentarians can push for legislations, and legislations can be put in the floor and be discussed. But there is a main question coming back to, as a barrier to the implementation of these projects of legislation, in which is who's going to pay for that. And these green or clean recovery programs are very expensive, or these universal income to address inequality is too expensive. But at the same time, so I think organizations as yours may be helping us with the data of what costs can cost these programs, but we have to compare it with something else, and comparing it with something else is comparing it to the non-action. So, for example, some researchers are saying that if we would have implemented the measures to prevent COVID, we will have saved a lot of money, because the cost to fight COVID is 500 times the price of the prevention. So the cost of clean recovery versus business as usual should be there helping us to argue in Parliament, because at the end, that's the major barrier. So if the panelists can address these questions, I will very, very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. And the next speaker is Lord Peter Bowness from the United Kingdom and Vice President as well of the OSCPA. Lord Bowness, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks to Toril and indeed the International Secretariat for arranging this webinar. I, like other speakers, add my thanks to our keynote speakers who've given us very interesting and full presentations. One thing that strikes me, however, is that politics, as we probably all understand it, didn't feature in the presentations as a whole. And on the one side, that's very good, because the subject of climate change and what we should be doing shouldn't fall foul of political disagreements. However, unless there's been a significant change for the better, there were outstanding territorial disagreements and interpretations of national boundaries in the region. And I wonder whether these have any effect on what we're trying to do, and whether they are likely to hinder our efforts in this connection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Bowness. Are there any other members wishing to take the floor? If not, for the time being, I would go back to our keynote guests, and then we will hear from our second committee rapporteur. But since we still do have time, if other PA members wish to intervene, please write it down in the chat, and the floor will be open again. We can go back to Professor Furevik for answers, comments. Please, Professor.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the question. So at least I will start with the one about the changes in the ocean that Margareta Cederfelt asked about. So what we see is that when the climate is shifting from a typical Arctic climate towards a more Atlantic climate, I mentioned that the water structure is changing, but what's also changing is that the whole ecosystem is responding to this. So what we see very clearly in the Barents Sea, for instance, and we also see it now into the Kara Sea and the Laptev Sea, so further along the coast of Siberia, is that when the warm saline or salty Atlantic water replaces the cold Arctic water, then also the the Arctic species, they are more or less disappearing. So the warm water species are replacing the cold water species. So for instance, north of Norway, that means that the cod, for instance, that we are fishing a lot, that's moving further east and further north, more into the Russian sector. So there are things with the fishing, who is going to fish in the future. But we see this everywhere in the world, actually, that the changes in climate is being followed by changes in the species distribution and changes in the ecosystem. So for the Arctic region, perhaps it's not that. Of course, we will lose Arctic species, but if you look at the total, perhaps it's not a very big change. But if you look at the tropical waters, for instance, where the coral reefs are disappearing because of too warm water, that's where we will see the really strong and really, what you say, dramatic impacts of climate change. And there was a report that came out from IPCC, from the UN IPCC 3 years ago, called 1.5 degree report, and the total or net effect on the total stock biomass in the world oceans are negative. So there will be less fish in the future. At the same time, we are going to feed more people. So it's there is an imbalance. We are actually losing species because of climate change. And then more about it's right, we see a warming. So what was mentioned by Rosa Galvez, that so in summertime the largest warming is along it's more on the rim of the Arctic Ocean, both on the Siberian side and then the Canadian side. So we see a strong warming there in the summertime. And I don't have the background to say so much about impacts there, but it's clear that we have an impact on the atmosphere, we have an impact on the weather, and we see this also further south. So we have one ocean, but we also have one atmosphere, so things are connected. So, and then the questions about the political questions and the role of politicians, I don't think I'm the right one to answer, but of course we need to be able to do our science, we need to have collaboration across borders. So for us, for instance, the EU budget and the Horizon Europe budget is of course extremely important for what kind of research we can do in the future. And that's a political issue. How one should one put money into business as usual activities, or should one put money into new areas, or yeah. So that's but that's more a political question. I don't think I'm the right one to answer. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And in the meanwhile, we received another request from the floor from one of our members. So if our other two panelists agree, I would give the floor immediately to our head of the Danish delegation and our treasurer, Peter Juel Jensen, and then go back to the other remarks of our experts at a later stage.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for, yes, thank you. And thank you for some very inspiring presentations. The problem is only getting bigger and bigger, so we have to act. We should have acted many years ago by cutting down our emissions. In Denmark, we're talking about a 70% cut down in our emission as soon as possible. It is going to be very, very expensive, but Denmark is only responsible for 0.1% of all the emissions in the world. So we're only a drop in the sea. So other countries, other parliaments, they have to act and take on the responsibility, because the results, as we have heard it from our scientists here today, is only that we are going to make things very complicated for our children and our grandchildren. So we just have to act. We have to cut down on emissions. We have to stop by using oil and gas. We have to be clean. We have to use wind power and solar power, and we have to invest a lot of money in that. And it's only going to be more difficult the next years because we are also having the challenges with the corona. But last time I was on Greenland, this is very, very visible. We are actually on Greenland, we are taking away all the possibilities to have a normal life up there with all the environmental consequences. And as we heard from our Norwegian colleague, the loss of species in the ocean, places to earn money, but also places to work. So we need to stop using black energy and going to use more green energy in the future. And as long as we are sitting on our hands, because we have been discussing this for the last 5 or 6 years in the OSCE, nothing is going to happen. So we have the responsibility, but we also have the power to do something about this. We are all parliamentarians. We can, each one of us can rise this discussion in our parliaments. And yes, it is going to be very, very expensive. But if we don't act, the future will look very black for our children and grandchildren. Will we take on that responsibility? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Hirpsime Grigoryan from Armenia. Please, you have the floor. We cannot hear you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Am I heard? Yeah, super. All right. So, dear distinguished guests and colleagues, good afternoon or whatever time it is in your countries. Good to see you all after this summer break, which was quite hard due to the pandemic. Let me start with thanking everyone for your contribution. And I will start with the idea already mentioned by very many of you. And it is also underlined in the concept note that we have, which is about the states cooperating together and being on board together in the spirit of joint ownership if we want to find and implement sustainable solutions. And right here, referring to my country, Armenia, I'd want too small to make a difference. As a country, there is strong potential for growth of renewable energy. I would for energy, despite being a fossil fuel importing country now, we have a great opportunity to continue what is called decoupling, the movement of two important curves in climate calculations further away from each other. So the curve of economic growth going up and the curve of GHG emissions going down. As part of commitments undertaken under the Paris Agreement, Armenia, along with other signatories, has committed to developing the so-called nationally determined contributions. This is a set of long-term goals which the country commits to in order to reduce its emissions and to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Equally important is the National Adaptation Plan. This is a very crucial plan for Armenia, which is aimed at conducting comprehensive medium and long-term climate adaptation planning. These plans virtually all sectors of human activity, including through health and transport, agriculture, tourism, urban planning. One of the most important outcomes expected as a result of NAP is integration of climate change into Armenia's national decision-making. It is important to remember that as the temperatures continue to rise and as we experience a decrease in precipitation, we would have to adapt virtually all infrastructures and sectors of our livelihood. Speaking about international effort towards tackling the climate challenge, it needs to be said that the window of making drastic and critical political about how we globally run our economies is narrowing down very fast. There was a great hype in the run-up to the climate summit last year in New York, to which the UN Secretary General called all the nations to come with a plan, not a speech, referring to plans to reach net zero emissions by 2050, shifting investments towards resilient infrastructure, thus putting us all on a sustainable path. But unfortunately, instead of hearing strong commitments from the biggest emitters in the world to ambitious GHG reduction plans, we heard mediocre commitments or even at times adversaries. Clear, and we are sure that we will witness a great momentum and a snowballing effect from the new generation, demanding climate justice and ownership of our generation's leaders to commit to ambitious action in order to prevent the climate perils of our planet. Finally, I want to say that our joint effort, ever and as in every crucial issue, is public awareness raising can be effective only when directed by a political will, and we need to show it and it. One essential thing to remember and understand is that the planet has existed for 4.5 billion years and will continue to exist regardless whether we make joint political decisions or not. So let us make them. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Christine Blower from the United Kingdom.
So good afternoon, everyone. And I must say, I'm terribly sorry that owing to the fact that I had a previous commitment, I didn't hear the keynote speakers, so I've joined late. But I do have a question to participants and to the presenters, which is this. My background is that I was a teacher for 35 years. And following the previous speaker, it's absolutely true that climate justice has captured the imagination of very many of our young people, but it hasn't captured the imagination of all of our young people. And of course, the need for climate justice and the need for information about the current situation and what we face is not evident in all of our education systems, in all of our different countries. Sometimes in some jurisdictions, it will be left to the enthusiasms of teachers. In others, the national governments may not have made a determination that it should be taught. In yet others, it may be being taught, but it may be that the current cohort of teachers don't feel themselves sufficiently au fait with all of the information that they need in order to teach this in a convincing way. And what is more, that we need obviously to make our children and young people in our education systems absolutely aware of what we may be facing, but we also need to inject a sense of optimism and hope, as the previous speaker just said, because if we just leave everyone in our classrooms and our lecture halls feeling that there is nothing that can be done either at the individual or regional or national or global level, you know, that's a very bleak outlook. And indeed, David Attenborough, of whom many of you will have heard and seen his work, had a spectacularly good television program on BBC on Sunday evening, which I think concluded with the sense that we do have to have optimism about this. So my question, if it is a question, is whether people can say what it is that's being done in their own jurisdictions within their education systems in order to make sure both that young people understand the challenges that we face, but also that they are provided with an optimistic path of what can be done in terms, for example, of coming out of the global pandemic, how we will simply have to do things differently from the way in which we did them going in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is the head of the delegation of Liechtenstein, Mr. Günther Vogt. Please, you have the floor.
Hello to everybody from Liechtenstein. I have a similar concern as Mr. Jensen from Denmark, and Liechtenstein criticizes that the fact and is very concerned that certain countries contribute too little to reduce emissions. Other countries are not consistently implementing the goals or are refusing to participate in the Paris Agreement. Regrettably, the United States even have restarted its withdrawal from the agreement. So Liechtenstein is very convinced that this problem is happening. And we are talking about a global crisis and a global problem. So Liechtenstein is ready to engage in a constructive dialogue, and in particular with the countries which are considered to be the main and large emitters, countries which are not complying to implement, or countries which are not have signed or ratified the Paris Agreement. So my question is, and I think this is the main question, what can OSCE PA do to improve this situation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any other member of the Parliamentary Assembly registered, but a very welcomed guest, Ms. Melanie Helm from the Climate Crisis and Migration Team of the United Nations Studies Association. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I have a question actually to the participants, because as you can see, I'm quite young and I was wondering, can you hear me? Yes. And I was wondering if there is any plans for a collaboration between the youth and change makers, because I think the youth just does not have a voice until they're almost 30. And still, this generation is the generation that grew up with knowing if there is not a change, there's just no hope for our generation, there's no future. So I would like to ask you if there is any plans to really making a collaboration between the youth and including them in political discussions and processes to give them a voice to decide for their future. Like, I'm talking not about youth programs, but I'm talking about really giving many youth the voice to talk and not just be, a reporter or something. That's what I would like to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll leave our parliamentarians to reply, but indeed, also in the OSCE, there is a growing, let's say, perception on the need to include youth and security policy contribution from the youth. It is something that is growing indeed. And so let's keep the contact since we are very glad you took part in this webinar, and let's be in touch and create some kind of partnership or contact, and we'll be very glad to engage further in this. I see in the chat that you are having already a lot of support from our members. This is very, very, very nice. So thank you very much for your contribution. The list of speakers is exhausted, and I would therefore go back to our keynote panelists. Well, Professor Furevik already replied to some answers, but maybe he would like to reply further. But Professor, I will come to you then at the end. I will kindly ask Ms. Torstensdottir from the Arctic Council for her final comments. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, since I am not a climate expert myself, I will defer to the expert to comment on specific action to address climate change. But from the perspective of the Icelandic chairmanship, I would like to say the evidence of the impact of climate change in the Arctic is there. The reports and the assessments are there. The experts have developed policy recommendations, and I would point out that US parliamentarians are in a unique position to take advantage of them and act on them, as your special representative has indeed underlined. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would now go to Mr. Daniele Violetti from United Nations Climate Change.
Thanks. Well, I mean, I just pick up a couple of points that I initially made and perhaps reiterate them. And more importantly, the fact that in this period that there is the possibility of having resources, financial resources assigned to this economic crisis and recovery, these should go hand in hand with doing that in a sustainable way and taking advantage where possible of the opportunity that technological choices, type of energy use are in line with the global goals related to sustainable development. And it's indeed true that the cost of non-action is going to grow dramatically. Comparison to the cost can be already high now of taking appropriate action in a more sustainable way. So I think on that side, the approach of investing in the future is part of overall blueprints that I have mentioned earlier. And a final word again on the role of parliamentarians or the legislators. They were, again referring to the nationally determined contributions. These are the national plans that have been, submitted by governments for responding to climate change under the Paris Agreement. And the opportunity now that comes is to revise, update those after the initial ones to, have more ambition embedded in that, more knowledge as well, more taking into account the developments, and therefore the efforts in that space at the national level are the one who are defining the action at the domestic level until 2025, until 2030, and as I said already, 121 of our member states have committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So 121 is quite a sizable number, and more needs to join this global effort. So appreciate the constraints and the time of uncertainty, but the path in front of us is those of sustainability, which all the measures to ensure that this is a transition to a low carbon and a resilient future, which is just and taking account all constituencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Violetti. Professor Furevik, do you wish to respond to the second part of interventions?
Yes, I can just say a few words, and that's about the issues that Kristina Blova raised and also Melanie Helm. So it's about education and how to engage the next generation and teach them about sustainability and climate and how to how to be part of the changing the society. So it's clear that there is enormous amount of energy in the young generation, and they want to see action. And it's very important to incorporate the young voices into all political, into all political actions. And for instance, in Bergen, at the Bjerknes Center where I am working, we have lots of activities where we bring in young people. We have school programs. We are teaching them about climate data so they can do projects with climate data, and we also bring them into more activities that we have to really put focus on climate change and SDGs. And I just sent out a tweet yesterday actually, because this summer has been the warmest summer ever observed on the planet. But I think it put things into perspective if you say that this is probably one of the coldest summers that the young people will experience in a lifetime. So climate change is so fast now, so the warmest we have had is soon becoming a very cold summer. So it's clear that it's not us, it is the next generation that will really feel climate change. So it's very important to bring these voices in, and not only bring them in so we can listen to them, but actually that it's part of the implementation plans on how to make actions. And I also would say that I'm really cheering Denmark, because it's a very ambitious climate plan, and it's something that I also think Norway should look towards, because it's we see that, for instance, renewable wind power and companies, they are earning money much more than, for instance, the traditional fossil fuel companies are doing it. So it seems that the green transition is already happening many places, and it's I'm quite optimistic. It's going too slow, but I'm quite optimistic about the future. So, but again, don't forget the young people and to educate the next generation, because that's the most important thing we are doing, I think. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Before we go towards the conclusion, we have an additional request from the floor from Ms. Grigorian from Armenia. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to say once again, also to all other colleagues who took over the topic of the youth, because actually I do believe that we and the younger generation is the one who needs to be most active, and they actually are. And what I want to say is that there was a question about what do the countries do and what do the governments do towards engaging more youth. So just wanted to make a small comment on that. Right now we're developing the new electoral code, and we're considering to lower the age starting where the voters can, the citizens can vote. So this is one thing in this direction. But also I want to mention that during the Velvet Revolution, which took place in our country, the purely domestic event that actually brought back democracy to the country, the youth were the leading especially young women were very active. And so I think that we continue having very many youths and also women in our governments and in the parliaments, and the average low in comparison to many other European countries, but also in other countries around the globe. So yeah, I think that we need to keep this up, and we will be in touch. I will be in touch with Melanie with great pleasure. So thank you very much for, and youths, go ahead, you're the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also second being part of the category. And I give the floor to Peter Juel Jensen from Denmark. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. A side effect from the climate change is that we have another security perspective in the Arctic area. As the ice is melting, more and more superpowers think that they have reason and think that they need to be present in the Arctic area, and we don't want them up there. It used to be that the Arctic area was an area where there was peace and harmony, but now when new superpowers come up there, Russia, China, and try to play a role in the Arctic area, it is not good. So we also have a security area on top on the climate change. We can see that more and more countries, they would like to get hold on Greenland, and they want to explore oil and gas in the Arctic area. But if that goes wrong, we have a big challenge in the future. So we also need to make sure that we still, when the climate changes are showing their ugly face, that we can keep the Arctic area an area where there is not a lot of military power, and it's only for the countries who have ground and people up there.
Thank you very much. And before handing the floor to rapporteur of the second committee for her concluding remarks to this webinar, I will give back the floor to Special Representative Turil Eidsheim. Please, Turil.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you all of you for contributing to a very interesting discussion, and I look very much forward to working further on with the report after this meeting. I would like to make two short remarks, if I may. And the one is connected to Peter Bonus's question regarding the territorial disagreements. And of course, it's challenging, but I would like to show or focus at the work, the existing work within the Arctic Council and the good cooperation that is existing there. And I think it's really, really important to support that the cooperation that is there, and also to be aware and prevent conflicts to be imported from other parts. And then I would also like to say thank you very much, Melanie, and also Ritsna, for your contribution. It's really nice. So, of course, I think it's Christine, you said we need optimism, but we also need trust, and we also need the will to do something. So I look forward to the summit from Ilona. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you very much. And this concludes the agenda item on the open debate. I think it's good we heard both from representatives from Arctic countries and non-Arctic countries. And I think this was exactly the spirit that we wanted for this webinar, for this debate, from the Arctic to global. I will now give the floor to Ms. Ilona Geberia Hodja, rapporteur of the OSCE General Committee on Economic Affairs, Science, Technology and Environment, for her concluding remarks. Ilona, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Guido. Dear participants, dear Roberto, Secretary General, dear Vice President, Lord Bones and Margareta Sederfeld, dear distinguished experts and keynote speakers of today's webinar, dear Toril, and thank you for the invitation to speak today in this important platform. Climate changes are global issues that affect all the globe, society and people. It requires global answers and actions, and we are all witness at how these changes are having detrimental effect on Arctic and beyond. It's very promising that there are some outcomes from the recent EU Arctic, EU Council, and also other important meetings. It is important to have the political collaboration of the key stakeholders in Arctic and the need for common ownership of the efforts. And it's famous, the phrase that also was mentioned today, what happens in Arctic doesn't stay in Arctic. The climate changes creates concerns and challenges, which also affects the economical and political spheres. The climate crisis creates also the threat in multiple dimensions. And therefore, we need the spirit, it was mentioned here, responsibility and collaborations to sort such issues. Dear colleagues, as it also mentioned by the experts today, we are having a lot of, let's say, drastic effect of the global warming. Sea ice is disappearing, old thick sea ice is also disappearing, planet is heating up, strong warming observed in the Arctic, and the changes are more dramatic than we can imagine. I also would like to bring to your attention some recent data that also finds that 13% of deaths in Europe are linked to the pollutions, which means 1 death out of 8 due to the pollution. The government and the parliamentarians must place the environmental issues at the top of the agenda, and it needs urgently also to aware public opinion, including young people, which also was emphasized today, on the detrimental links between environment and health, and also the impact of climate changes overall. I also would like to thank and appreciate the work of the OSCE and that has done on the issues of the environment and the link with the second dimensions, and also to the work, special work that special coordinator Toril has done, and to compliment for her for the dedication, and which has, let's say, as it was mentioned, has brought into the OCPA agenda Arctic issues. We have to focus more in these issues in future. More than a climate crisis, we need also to talk and bring solutions for the environment crisis with far-fetched repercussions on human beings, security, and the climate. I also would like to mention the OCPA declaration that was approved in Luxembourg, where we were committed that it is the role of national parliaments to develop legislative proposals with the aim of advancing sustainable development and security and implement OSCE commitment in the economic and environment dimension. Parliamentarians has really a crucial role to play, and we are all a link between the OSCE and the people it serves. No country owns the geographic North Pole or the region of the Arctic Ocean surrounding it. There are a lot of challenges. The more complete the list of challenges, the more likely it is that both regions and nations can work together to find possible solutions to threats. Above all, we need to be optimistic, in good spirit and with hope, save our planet. And the last but not least, it was also a list of the commitment that parliamentarians can do, including Paris Agreement, 2030 Agenda, including the national action plans, and the contribution of all stakeholders to bring the climate ambitions in the national level and the OCBA. Of course, without understanding the crucial role and the energy we need from the young people and including all the young people in our actions and in our plans. By thanking all of you, by thanking also Marco for the help that I got from the OSCE, I wish you good luck and let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also forward greetings by President Tsereteli, who unfortunately did not manage to join us today. It's a very busy process towards elections in Georgia. He wanted to join, but unfortunately other commitments prevented him from, but it's also a topic to which President Tsereteli attaches a lot of interest. He appointed Turil Aitsam a special representative exactly to have the OSCPA focus on these topics. So thank you once again to all our guest speakers and to our members for the engagement. There have been many inputs. If possible, if you have any written contribution, please do send it to us. We will compile a report of this webinar. It will be circulated among participants. It will also be published on the OSCPA website in the next week or in the coming weeks, trying to recollect the many ideas, priorities that have been mentioned today, and possibly to help us set the way forward on how the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly can continue to address this topic and can be more targeted in doing so. Before concluding, I would also like to thank the team that worked in the organization of this webinar behind the scenes. You don't see them, but they are here with us. In particular, our colleague from the Norwegian Parliament, Mr. Björn Willy Robstad, and Ms. Anastasia Kriadasova here next to me. The webinar would not have been possible without their support. I hope the debate was useful and interesting, engaging. One piece of information, the next OSCPA web dialogue will take place on the 14th of October on the topic of fighting corruption. And it will be chaired by the PA Special Representative on fighting corruption, Irene Karalambides from Cyprus. With this, I wish also to thank the interpreters for their work. And if there are no other requests from the floor, if Turil, unless Turil wants to wrap it up.
No, you wrapped it up just perfectly, but thank you all of you. And as you said, there has been a lot of people working with this webinar, and thank you for everyone that attended and showed up today. Nice to see all my colleagues and also the other participants. Thank you all of you and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you for participating, and the meeting is closed.
Thank you all.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Well done.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.